introduce yourself.
Hello, good evening, everyone. My name is Moonli, and I'm certainly alcoholic. Um, I am genuinely lucky enough and grateful enough for you, Jay. You are such a gracious human. The stories you share, the conscious message that you carry, I know that it comes from a heart full of love and service and gratitude, and I'm really touched. So thank you so much for having me here. It's really good to see everyone on a Saturday evening sober. Thanks to each and every single one of you. The world is a safer place because we're all here, right? And I was sitting here reflecting on things and about the people who were here when I got to AA and how important it was, how they welcomed the newcomer. And, it just brings back all of the feelings about how much we really influence one another. And you have no idea how your kindness or something you say can transform someone else's life. And I'm genuinely humbled and deeply grateful to be with all of you. Congratulations if anyone's celebrating their milestones. And I just want to welcome the newer people. My prayer is that alcohol and drugs are done with you. And I would suspect that a lot of us who are here tonight are survivors. And I believe that the greatest gift we have as alcoholics is our ability to share with one another. It's far better therapy for the alcoholic like me, because when I hear you share your pain, I can say, yes, I know what you're feeling, and I mean it, and it's honest. Because you see, when I came to AA, I was egocentric, self-determined. I was filled with so much shame and guilt so often about the harm I caused, about the embarrassment in which I lived. It was really hard to pay attention to anything good. There was just so much in between my thoughts and behaviors. And I was lifted out of that by grace. The people that have come before me said, there is another way. And we're going to introduce you to that way because it's remarkable. You can rely on it. And it's only after doing this work that I began to learn that behind that mask was a life of desperation. And that desperation is a signal of my soul sickness. And that in the deepest part of my soul, the true self desires to get connected to this power that I call God. So my sobriety date is December 21st, 2007. I'm 17 years, 3 months sober. I have a home group. I've always been sponsored. I sponsor others. I do service. And I'm involved in AA quite strongly. And that's been the making of me, passing this message on to others. And I'm just a conduit. I'm not any kind of model of AA. I'm just a traveler on this journey, just sharing with you my experience. But I certainly don't run away from talking about God today. Because you see, for most of my life, I lived in that almost apologetic zone. But my faith has been very important to me. And anyone close to me knows that. It's a very personal, vulnerable, and sometimes really challenging and terrifying relationship. Learning more from disappointments and setbacks rather than any triumphs, that's for sure. But it's a topic that I'm most passionate about. But what I say is not the way to sobriety or spiritual matters. It is a way. I don't gallop out of bed with a big smile on my face every day. I'm quite aware of my ongoing deterioration, and I just try to live with it one day at a time. So I'm not here to influence you or tell you what to believe. Each of us can discover for ourselves the ways in which we can approach this God as we understand God. Funny thing is, in AA, you don't have to believe anything. That's the most wonderful part about this. No one can tell you what to believe. Bill Wilson was a genius to tell us that you just select a higher power in any way you want to get started on a spiritual journey. Some of us pick the group, some of us pick the trees. This idea to revolutionize our own life, that I no longer had to have the burden of thinking that I had to do everything, that there was another way. And oddly enough, I didn't have to do anything other than surrender. It's a paradox for me, but I've been practicing doing this diligently for over 17 years. And as I've grown in my recovery journey, I've come to learn about living life sober, about having well-being, about caring for others, giving and receiving love, and appreciating the simplest of things. And every day, I continue to choose becoming happier, healthier, and more healed. So I'm in love with AA. How could you not? I belong here. This is my community. You are my people. And I believe very strongly that we have something sacred. It changes lives and hearts. And I personally want to be in that conversation. That AA has helped millions of people all over the world that have been touched by the message of Bill W. and Dr. Bob. And sometimes I just sit in awe and witness the miracles. And if you're involved here and you're making amends and you're repairing the damages and you're getting your family back, people in your life back, and sometimes fixing those impossible, irreparable relationships through this process, and you're helping others and you're returning to society, and you're watching other people who were so depressed and alone that they thought they'd never be free. And now they're sponsoring people, and you go to their celebrations and anniversary and you watch what happens. I mean, how could you not love the thing that's making that possible? But it wasn't always that way with me. You see, I was beaten by alcoholism. I'm a drunk. I'm a bar drinker. I'm a living room drinker, a bedroom drinker. Sorry. I'm an I'm an alley drinker, a car drinker, an office drinker, a grocery store drinker, an equal opportunity drinker. And coupled with that, I'm a blackout drinker. Nothing more exciting for me than leaving work on March 8th, coming back on March 12th, discovering that I'd been there the entire time. It makes the time between paychecks so much shorter, right? But if you're a blackout drinker, you're not paying attention. Everything's so fuzzy. So a lot of what I report to you have been reported to me by people, and I just have to believe that they're telling me the truth. But you know what? I loved these dark, dark bars. They were smoky. They had that wonderful booze urine smell. Sometimes, if I was in a cranky mood, I'd just drive by one of those places, open the door, and it just perked me up for the rest of the day. And I'm fascinated by the quality of people who drink in those places. There were CEOs of big companies, bank presidents, neurosurgeons. Well, that's what they said they were. But it never really occurred to me that I was living any differently than anybody else. Very strange. I thought that I drink because I want to drink. I did not know that I didn't have a choice, that I put alcohol into an alcoholic body, and I had no choice, no choice. And in retrospect, I can tell you that I was a chronic, helpless, hopeless alcoholic. My disease manifests itself in rationalization, justification, and denial. No matter what it is I do, I explain to you why I'm doing it. As I'm explaining it to you, I'm hearing it. And as I'm hearing it, I'm believing it. And I would make all kinds of excuses, shrug my shoulders with all sincerity and say it was bad luck, it was circumstances and conditions, it was the police, it was you, it was they, them, it was a lot of things. It never occurred to me that it had anything to do with alcohol. Never. So I was born in England to Anglo-Indian parents. I'm English and Indian. I'm an only child, very colorful family. There were eccentric scholars and musicians. And from very, very early on, I had this pathological feeling of being different. I had tremendous anxiety. I was dyslexic. I had a speech impediment. And I just felt like I was on the wrong planet, and a lot of craziness at home, violence, abuse, incest. My mom and I got kicked and punched and slammed against the wall. Verbal abuse, you're nothing. You don't deserve to be here. My dad did things that no man should ever do. And what happened to us should never happen to anyone. And he would disappear for months. And I was so ashamed of what was going on at home that I would just make up stories that I fell off my bike or a tree. The consequences of regular abuse is not pretty. And Most of us have some type of trauma that we've dealt with, whether it's some form of abuse or neglect or abandonment that we've held on to. And for me, there was just a great deal of unaddressed pain. I was a professional athlete growing up. That's the life I lived. And I didn't have examples of other athletes opening up about abuse or about alcoholism. I never saw that model. So I acted like it didn't happen, that I have to be strong and tough. And I became really, really hardened and very sad and depressed inside. And I wanted to isolate. So I spent a lot of time alone, and a lot of it manifested in attachment to the negative. I mean, alcoholism and addiction can happen to anyone, anywhere. I am a convinced alcoholic, but there is no doubt that the conditions and upbringing exacerbated my drinking. But as we all know, life as an alcoholic is bloody terrifying, right? Looking back, the scariest thing I ever did was years and years and years of drunk driving, and I rationalize it. I think it's one of those things today, looking back, scares me the most. There was an AA speaker who said that a lot of his story is a matter of seconds and inches. Couple of seconds difference, inches difference, and it would have been a very different story. And that's quite true for me. So I'm grateful that I'm not a statistic, and I did not make anybody else a statistic. But alcohol had become my power, my friend, my companion, my support. And at some point it turned. It began to strip me of my self-esteem, of self-worth, of dignity, of integrity, decency, all the things we have as human beings. And long before I got to you, alcohol controlled every year of my life, where I would live, where I would work, the people I would run with, and eventually the people I would run from. But no one could coerce me into recovery. I had to have my last drink. In fact, some of my most valuable experiences have been the most painful ones, humiliating ones. I had to get to that jumping off place. And thank God I did, because, I came to AA just hopeless, desperate, frantic, looking for an answer. Because for me, it was simply life or death. It was. Bill Wilson writes in our literature that to be doomed by an alcoholic death or to live on a spiritual basis are not always easy alternatives to face. And I think that the alcoholic death that Bill talks about is to continue to live in the incomprehensible demoralization, in the shame, to continue to live dreaming dreams and planning plans and not being able to get off that bar stool, to get anything done, to continue to live promising the people who love us that we won't do it again, and promising that and promising and promising, and then we do it again. I know I did it again and again. And I think that's the alcoholic death that Bill Wilson talks about, to be doomed to an alcoholic death or to live on a spiritual basis. If you're new here tonight, I just want you to know that the reality is this was not an easy choice for any of us. And I think that that's the choice I was asked to make, because in that moment of clarity, I knew if I went out one more time, I would either die or I'd become institutionalized for life. And I never, ever, ever want to go back to that hell again. So I went to my first meeting in New York City on December 21st, 2007. And I didn't know anything about AA. I walked in and I thought it was a place between Weight Watchers and Jehovah's Witnesses. Strange cult. And they drank coffee and they talked about feelings and day at a time and dignity and gratitude for breathing sober air. And I spoke to them about how they should embrace their inner child and maybe they should write a letter to the 10-year-old version of themselves. And when I finished, they said, "Oh, that was lovely. Keep coming back." Magical words. Keep coming back. I heard this woman share. I was so intrigued by her story. I felt moved when she had upsets in her life. I was joyful for her successes and her accomplishments. I was with her in her disturbances. I was with her all the way. I had no idea it's called identification. I was riveted. So I went back and I heard other people, and they told equally interesting stories. And I think that alone qualifies me as an alcoholic. I think if I come here and I find it interesting to hear stories about people ruining their lives and how they vomited on clients and lost their jobs and their family and their children don't talk to them and they're crawling on the bathroom floor, or they contemplated murder or suicide, or decided to blow up the house so the wife couldn't get it. If we find that sort of thing fascinating, there is something not quite right with us, right? And not only did I find it fascinating, I find it endlessly interesting. More than 17 years later, what people have survived, how they've been restored, all sorts of things happen. I'm still intrigued. I'm still loving it. And I think it's imperative that we listen and we tell our stories and we never, ever lose that in AA. And you know what? People were extraordinarily kind to me. And there is something about this. It's the kindness. I know that some people need tough love, but I stay away from tough love. I have no use for that. I had this idea that those people were very wise, that their grumpiness was born out of some weathered, extended experience. So I attached this other value, which was all in my head. And until I stayed sober enough, long enough, I didn't find out that they were just really angry and mean. You see, I need the truth, but I personally need it with the anesthetic of love. If I show tough love today, it often means that I'm impatient. So kindness is my overwhelming impression of these years in AA. As a group, AA has been very, very kind to me. And I try as much as I can to be tolerant and kind back, especially when I don't feel like being that way. And spirituality is probably kindness and being good to others. I used to think it had something to do with candles and aromatherapy. It doesn't. So I fell into the hands of some people who encouraged me to form 4 habits. And these 4 habits literally changed my life. The first habit is the meeting habit. There is a meeting going on, and you don't have to be somewhere else to be there. You just have to get there at least 10 or 15 minutes early, talk to someone, and stay 10 or 15 minutes late. The next habit is the God habit. Even if you don't believe in God, get down on your knees every day and ask whoever's running the universe for help to stay sober. And every night you get down on your knees and thank whoever is running the universe for a day of sobriety and know that you did not do it. The third habit is the transparency habit, that every day I must talk to another member of AA about what's going on inside me, my feelings, my thoughts, and what's going on outside of me, work, relationships, finances. And the last habit, and I've come to believe is the most important one, it's one of our legacies, is a service habit. That every day I say yes to some sort of service, whether it's spending time with a newcomer who needs to talk, or taking someone through the steps, or taking someone to a meeting, or making coffee, or chairing a meeting, or maybe at work, being nice to someone instead of reacting to them. Even if they're really angry or uptight, that I am to do some kind of service every day. And that's a powerful, powerful thing. You see, our entire fellowship comes down to love and service. And so I had the willingness to go to meetings and get a sponsor, work the steps, and do whatever it takes. And slowly, I started to get better. You see, when we do this work, the light switch comes on. And it has knitted me together in a way that I absolutely cannot describe. So if you're in your early sobriety, congratulations, because most don't make it this far. And I was told very early on that we are in the very elite group. We are in the elite of the mentally ill, and you have arrived. So this is a deadly disease. There are scary things I see happen to people in sobriety that don't address their alcoholism through a recovery program. Many end up drinking or taking pills, or they commit suicide, or live miserably. We have an illness. Some of us are not taking responsibility for the treatment of our illness. And I was told that if one relapses, and one's sobriety to double that spiritual activity, to get back to meetings, to start work with a sponsor, redouble your effort. And that is the treatment for relapse. Because when I read the first 164 pages of the big book, I thought, if you look at any legitimate philosophy or religion, East, West, ancient, and in every form, one of the spiritual principles that we find is you get what you give. As you sow, so shall you reap. You receive from the universe what you put out into the universe. And I learned about the disease. I've got a physical allergy coupled with a mental obsession, and I've developed this spiritual sickness that is alcoholism. And this spiritual illness is really the mystery element for me, because it puts me beyond being helped by well-meaning people, family, successful career, professional help. And I didn't even understand the problem, that the architecture of my spiritual sickness is resentments, fear, and sexual misconduct. It's in the book, and I have to treat these areas. And I think we're always given the right people at the right time. And I met this well-meaning, irritating nightmare of a woman. She was my sponsor. She said and did everything for my good. She was louder than my head. Thank goodness, because I was nuts. I was just crazy. A typical conversation with my sponsor would be, I'd call her and say, okay, I've gathered all the evidence now, and they're out to get me. And I've decided that I'm just going to destroy and just burn everything down. I don't care. And she would say, I think it's a good idea, but can you wait until Friday? And I'd say, yes, I can wait. Half hour later, I'd call her and say, I'm sorry, I just can't wait until Friday. I'm doing it now. And she'd say, okay, do it. Let me know how it goes. And I love that, because she understood that my way is not, until I get to the end of my own thinking, until I understand that my way is never going to work, I'm not going to have a spiritual experience. If I'm doing it for her, if I'm doing it because that's what she told me to do, I may feel okay in the moment, but I'm just going to recreate the same exact situation and do it again and again and again until I can have a real surrender. I remember once being so twisted around the axle about something, and she said, oh, look how cute you are out there managing your own life. And, she was the best thing that ever happened to me in recovery. And she would always say, the answer is more love, or what would God have me be? Or more self-care. And that third one, more self-care, is usually the one that's required, because I'm prone to getting disconnected and start trying to reconnect to other things, to the material world. And I forget that this is about entering the spiritual world. A lot of the success of Alcoholics Anonymous is through this process of distraction. While we're going to meetings, while we're working the steps and being service to others, God can come in and change us. And a good night's sleep cures a lot of things. That's been my experience. As alcoholics, we have an ability to be dishonest in relationships, right? To be pathological on a delusional level. And when one has a very painful childhood, we grow up really quickly. And so going into the fourth step, I thought all these people on my list really owe me an amends. And as I'm doing this work and going through the process, now I'm starting to look at this from an entirely different angle, through their eyes, to look at my side of the street, realize my patterns. And now I'm not hiding my own selfish, vindictive, self-seeking behavior in their shadow anymore. I'm starting to look at my actions. And it's not a pretty sight, let me tell you that. Because I was great at hiding what a terrible daughter I was behind the shadow of the imperfections of my parents. And how often I'd stare at the defects of others to justify myself. And so here, I get to do this completely different. I have to be willing to bring to the table in any relationship what I want to get out of it. If I want you to be kind and loving, I have to be willing to bring that. I have to be willing to be unselfish, to be honest. So what I get in a relationship is quite often what I give. And I did my fifth step and step 6 and 7. And then I sat down to write my amends. And they tell us that miracles will happen. Believe me, I testify to that wholeheartedly because my parents would have never, ever made that list of ultra miracles. That was just beyond my comprehension. And I was horribly wrong about that. And so many other things I was wrong about. There are things that happen to us when we do this work. We get an infusion of grace. And I can't explain to you how this happens. I just know it's going to happen. It always does. You see, I resented and hated my dad my whole life. I character assassinated him for years. He was literally the hardest amends I had to make. And I was asked to just remain willing. And at the right time, I was finally able to make amends to my dad. I spent some time with him and we started talking about the past. And I said, we probably could have been helped or done things differently. And he said, yes, you're probably right. And it's one of those things where I thought, as I'm having this conversation, I didn't just hear that. And I tried to walk in his shoes and I started to feel his pain. And that was just the beginning. I said, I'm sure it was difficult for you. And he said, yes, there was a lot of rage. And I was in utter disbelief having this conversation, looking at my dad. He's this self-centered, selfish, untreated person, but here it is, and there we were. I have no explanation. He was ill and I looked after my dad. And I held his hand and I said, you are my dad, and I love you and I don't want to hate you anymore. And if there is anything I can do, please let me give that to you. And he didn't quite get it. He looked at me weird, but he knew I was telling the truth. No more axes to grind, it's time to heal. I brought the change and I became changed that day. I was able to stand up and straight and walk away feeling renewed from it because I knew he is my reflection and my mirror. And my life certainly started to change as a result of it. I lost my dad in sobriety, and by then, the whole relationship had changed. And we could talk about anything under the sun. And I miss him so deeply. And yet, I feel his presence. I hear his voice sometimes. I know that some of the things that are innate in me, that are of value, came from him. And his spirit is alive within me. So you see, the impossible eventually becomes possible in God's hands and in God's time. It's a very synchronistic endeavor. And synchronicity is what Carl Jung talked about. And it's a beautiful view of the universe, a universe that exists to accommodate desire. From the moment of the desire to do the right thing, he said the universe starts to move and shift slowly, and eventually the impossible becomes possible. And that truly is my story thus far. And what I've discovered is that forgiveness is a gift that we bestow upon ourselves. Yes, we do let the other person off the hook energetically, but it doesn't mean that we right their wrongs. It means that we forgive and release ourselves. Now, that was a really big one for me. And that goes for any time I've got anger towards someone, or I can't forgive this person, or I can't forgive myself for something. Here is the message that I received. Our unwillingness to forgive, even the most horrific events, is what keeps us in the judgment cycle. We judge others because we believe that it's a way to protect ourselves. Then we judge ourselves for judging. And in the case of deeply traumatic events, we feel even more justified in our judgment of the perpetrator. I know I have. But that judgment literally blocks me from any peace. It keeps the traumatic wounds open, and I keep fear alive through my unwillingness to forgive, as I continue to perceive myself as a victim. And I've learned that without forgiveness, we continue to live in the shadows of our past and our projections of the future. And this isn't to say we need to forgive immediately or we let somebody off the hook for seriously hurting us. And it certainly doesn't mean that I need to have this person in my life. But I no longer have to expend energy on judging them. We simply need to be willing to forgive. And the moment that we become willing, God hears our call and can step in and guide our path and reverse the effects of judgment and fear. Even if we are not sure how it will happen or how long it will take, we can allow ourselves to begin to heal. You know, as someone who has struggled with depression, trauma, and alcoholism for most of my life, these practices have transformed my life and given me hope that I never thought was possible. You know, I've experienced the karmic shifts in my own life as a result of taking actions that I didn't believe would work or make a difference, that I thought had something to do with some kind of high moral issue. And it really wasn't that at all. It has to do with my spiritual condition in aligning myself with God and consequently with God's kids. So there would be a rightness in here and a freedom so I can walk free on this earth. And I love our AA prayers. I love the 3rd step prayer, the 7th step prayer. I love the 11th step prayer. You know, this brings to mind, there is this European poet, Rainer Rilke, very lyrical. And he wrote this wonderful thing, and I want to share it with you. He said, "You must not be frightened if a sadness rises before you larger than anything you've ever seen. If a restiveness like light and cloud shadows passes over your hands and over all you do, you must think that something wonderful is happening to you, that life has not forgotten you, that it holds you in its hand. It will not let you fall." And I inserted God into that, that God is saying to me, you must not be frightened if you cannot do this properly, or let sadness overcome you, because I'm there with you. And here's the truth. We are living in very uncertain times, in chaos and distraction, where I'm constantly surprised by what's going to happen next. And it's not a good surprise. It's a negative surprise most of the time for me. And I'm a reactor. People drive me crazy, insane. And I react on a cellular level to crazy. And I can be very, very impatient when I'm stressed. And to tell you the truth, a lot of this appeals to my lower nature, my lower self, and it depletes me. It's not an attractive place to be. But I've decided that I just cannot and will not let anything get in the way of my mental health and my own emotional sobriety. So I go to Al-Anon. I'm an active and grateful member of Al-Anon consistently all these years. And my recovery gives me the instinct to wonder and question things, to speak up, to not be a doormat, but also to be a critical thinker. You know, I have a personal drive to be successful. And if something is not working, then I have to step back and do things differently. Because the world can be so full of conflicts. You know, people or relationships can be so toxic. And I've started to recognize that the answer is not going to come from outside of me, ever. We have to create that peace and calm within us, and I want access to that. And having said that, what I also see is God being used, quite frankly, when some people do horrendous things. Usually God is at the center, or some form of their vision of God, right? And what I see is that line is being blurred and used to hurt people. Incredible misogyny or incredible discrimination. I see increasingly that God is being weaponized. I live in the real world, so I know that. And I go through times when I have such doubt, you know? And the doubt is not if God exists. The crucible of doubt for me is, where is God? You know, why would a good God allow unmerited suffering? And this is like taking 20 punches in the gut in rapid succession, I tell you. But I would only say that it has more to do with humans than it does to do with any God. Looking out there in the world, this is not the world, in my view, that this higher power intended. We live in a broken world. There's just no getting around that. And it breaks my heart every single day. And I believe that my doubt is part of my faith. It's faith being worked out. It is an aspect of faith. So I try to internalize it. And I'm not trying to please anyone. I'm saying that to myself because this reminder and encouragement is something I need all the time. I need to be reminded that God is here within. I have to let that in. It's not something I learn once and it stands forever. It's like when you get married, right? You don't say, I love you. And then 30 years later, remember I told you that on our wedding day? No, you are in it every single day. And I have to continue to seek that connection. And that is how I think about my faith, because I'm struggling along blindly and I'm not religious. I don't let religious institutions ruin God for me. Growing up, I went to temples and churches. There's a lot about it that I still love and treasure. But there was also a lot of guilt and shame and rules and a sense of, for me, of always failing, never measuring up, and always wondering what this looming God figure might have thought of me. And through a life of recovery, what I have come to realize is mostly what God is doing at any given time is loving us. So it's rather a reframing for me, right? Rather than this angry taskmaster scolding or having a bill of particulars of all the ways we and all of humanity fails. So I try to know God for myself through prayer, through meditation, through service to you, through my personal interactions. And it's all really, really, really imperfect, and I try to accept that with grace and then have grace with failings. And I'm very, very, very fortunate. I've been graced in many, many ways. I have a beautiful partner who I'm married to. I'm eternally grateful. I don't quite know how that's happened. When I wasn't looking, without my permission, she walked into my life. And I learn every day how to be a better partner. And I don't have to make her responsible for my happiness and torture her whenever I'm not. And I don't have to be shinier or smarter. I can truly be my full self. And AA is a huge part of our life. I mean, we're in it to win it, We also go to a 12-step couples program. We have sponsors, we sponsor others, and we're involved. And we go on vacation, and going to an AA meeting is part of our vacation. And so I'm so very grateful. We're building our life. It's not been easy, but we have a really beautiful life together, full of hope. We started a company together. I know it's my calling, and I absolutely love waking up to my work. I'm good at it. It's how I want to serve the world. It's my dharma or eternal purpose. And we are going through an extremely difficult time dealing with a very toxic business partner who is a bully. He's abusive and trying to steal a significant project that we worked very hard for years. And we've now uncovered some very unethical, financial activities and all of that. And last year, I was in such a state of frantic hatred for this man, a lot of moments where I didn't feel grateful at all. It's been very, very painful. But you know what? In the past, I'd run away from things. I'd give in or just be a doormat. My part is getting involved with a toxic partner, but no one deserves to be treated this way. No one. So today in recovery, I know to take the next emotionally sober, intuitive action. But there's just a lot of uncertainty and financial stress. And I believe there is a deeper lesson here. And I have to keep going beneath the story and work with my discomfort in prayer, in stillness. Because you see, my mind flies back into the story and gets lost in, he said this and he did that, and why me? And you're asking me to sit here and feel and meditate? I don't want to do anything. I don't. And it was suggested to me that I have to keep going beneath the story. And I heard Don't let them get you to hate. Because when you let them, you've lost your center. You've lost everything within that's beautiful. And it's love-based and has a goodness, a sweetness about your soul and in life. Oh my God. Oh my God. And through the spiritual tools, I've come to experience that people we hate tend to be fun house mirrors for us. We hate something about ourselves that we see in them. So I saw the arrogance, the narcissism. I saw this rage that need to be right. And God maybe has a waiting room and said, "You're welcome. You're in my care. I love you. And we have some cleaning up to do." So where I am today is I have a new perspective and I'm deep in prayer. And on a practical level, of course, I have to take the actions, the right actions. So I have, legal, strategic, clear. And then on an emotional, spiritual level, I continue to do my inner work. And I have this battered old toolbox and I reach into it and I refuse to let any darkness dim my light or define my path. I try and stay in integrity. And through the love, through my partner, through you all, I can just stay in faith just for today. That is the reason. That is why I have to keep digging, allowing, keep giving up, letting go. It's so important, right? The power of letting go. It's fundamental. And I can do this at any time. I can notice the presence of God and my state changes. It's really mystical and can't be denied. The idea that the blind see, the deaf hear, the lame walk is among us right here. I couldn't see a lot in my addiction. I only heard what I wanted to hear and I wanted to sit and think about things. But there is an existence. You and I may not agree what that looks like, but we can't deny that it exists. It's a fact. There's no other way that I can explain how any of us can stay sober when all the time before we couldn't. And you may try to explain it 90 days, 90 meetings, good sponsor. There's nothing wrong with that. But that does not fully explain how an obsessive, compulsive, destructive, drinking person like me can stop. There is some divinity within each one of us. I truly believe that. And once we begin to notice, we begin to see and feel a power that exists. And I've been given the grace to see spiritually, to hear things that I need to hear, and to walk and be of service to others. And every day is a day where I must carry this vision of God's will into my activities. How can I best serve? Thy will, not mine, be done. These are the thoughts that must go with me constantly. That's the proper use of my will, as I've come to see. Just one more thing, coming to an end here. When I woke up this morning, I realized I had a dream about my mom last night. And you see, I lost my mom 89 days before I lost my dad. And she would always say to me that our unhappiness is the most fertile ground for the cultivation of inner strength, resilience, and compassion. So in any painful, stressful situation, I think the goal is to change how we see them, because otherwise the hard times become really toxic and destructive. And I hope that this grief that I have stays with me because of all the unexpressed love that I didn't get to tell her, I get to bring to the world. It's her unfinished business. And AA has brought me to this place so that I can honor my mom through my life, my work, and use it as a way to heal. Use it as a way to sew up my wounds. What is that great Mary Oliver line from Wild Geese? Tell me about despair yours and I'll tell you mine. Meanwhile, the world goes on. The kind of community that we have here that forms through our sorrow, our shared humanity, the woundedness we all carry and the descent into our wounds to heal them is really the only way through. And my mom was a pantheist. She saw God in all things. And that also meant interconnectedness. And she always said that the poem she wanted read at her memorial was, "Do not stand by my grave and weep. I'm not there. I do not sleep," which is obviously a classic and absolutely perfect and beautiful. But she was someone that had such a lack of ego. She just wanted to serve others. She knew we're here and then we're not. And we are the actions we take. And maybe the most important word, which sort of chokes me up a little, is the kindness that we leave behind. Because she's not gone, she's still here. Her kindness lives in me. And everyone she ever met, everyone that I've ever met, because her influence on me is inevitably so great. And I'm really, truly grateful for it. And I think the legacy that I strive for is a legacy of kindness, of compassion, of gentleness, a legacy of very, very small, invisible, huge life of love and kindness. Anyway, I need to close because I'm going on endlessly, but I'll say this. I was given a new life, and I've always been this passionate, you know? It's really a gift unearned. Thank you for the experience of AA. Thank you for my friendships. Thank you for your love. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being part of this meeting today. My work is never finished. You know, we all deserve to be free from the bondage of self-attack and self-judgment, to be free from the impermissible feelings of rage and terror, which is how I came in. And throughout sobriety, you know, we deserve to feel supported and guided. So if you're here, it means that you are seeking change. If you made it to this point, it means that you are seeking freedom from the past. You are exactly where you need to be. And this work is beautifully designed for an alcoholic like me to remind us that forgiveness of ourselves and forgiveness of others is a direct path to that freedom. It truly takes a lot of courage and strength to stay here, to continue to choose to recover. But for a hopeless drunk like me to let me have some meaning and some purpose in this world is truly redemption. It's truly redemption. So if you're new, please get involved here. Accept it completely and fully. And really thank even the most difficult times and the most difficult relationships that caused you harm and have revealed to you that every single day, there is the opportunity for physical, emotional, spiritual sobriety, for greater strength and growth. And so thank that part of you, as I do, that got us here, and watch the most incredible miracle, because as you change on the inside, you will watch the face of the earth change. And I learned that here in Alcoholics Anonymous, and I'm forever grateful for that. So thank you so much for listening, and I'll leave it there. Maybe it's early, but I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Yay. Thank you so much. Oh my God, let me